Jung was a tremendously insightful clinician, and he was a strange person, introverted visionary, high in introversion, very, 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 very high in openness, like off the charts. And also, God only knows what his IQ was. I mean, something, and he could read Greek, and he read he read a very large variety of ancient languages and was very familiar with the entire corpus of astrological thought and of alchemical thought and of classic literature and biblical stories, and I mean, educated in a way that no one is educated now. He's one of these visionaries who can see way underneath the social structures and look at patterns that are developing in Jung's case, across thousands of years, and lays them out. We're very complicated creatures, and we're run by all sorts of very strange things down there in the unconscious, and the Greeks thought we were the playthings of the gods because we serve lust, we serve thirst, we serve hunger, we serve rage, and those things all transcend us. So that's why they were gods. Rage, that's the war god. Well, why is it a god? Well, it exists forever. It exists in all people. It takes them over and directs their behavior. It's a god. No, it's not a god. Okay, fine. It's a psychological force. We have to think about it functionally to some degree. We have to think about what that idea means. We've had that idea forever. It isn't just some superstition. Jesus, we've got to be more sophisticated than that, man. Because you can't create your own values, right? It's hard. You're not your own slave. You can't just tell yourself what to do. You have a nature. And so Jung's idea was, that we had to go back to the mythology. We had to go back to the stories. We had to go back into the underground, unconscious chaos and lift out what we had forgotten. And that's what he was trying to do with his psychology, and he's done it very effectively. Very, very effectively. He was a revolutionary thinker, but very difficult to understand.
You say do nothing, that your life is meaningless if you're doing nothing. But what do you mean by doing nothing?
Well, by not accepting any responsibility, by not lifting a great load, by not acting out the archetype of the hero. That's what people are. That's what men are. If they're anything, they're mythological heroes. If they're any... Started to study Carl Jung and his ideas of archetypes, and the notion that people inhabit stories was very striking to me, and that these stories have a structure, and that there are great stories that elucidate that structure profoundly and clearly. It often seems as if what Jung was doing was hypothesizing the existence of inherited memory content, and he never is really all that clear about how he formulates the concept of the collective unconscious, except to say that because we're all human, and because I'm paraphrasing, I suppose, because we're all human and because we all share the same biological platform, a platform that we share even with animals to a large degree, we tend to interpret the world in very similar ways, and those interpretations are often expressed in stories. Stories are descriptions about how human beings act, and our fundamental problem in the world is how to act. And so one of the most fundamental stories, for example, is the hero archetype, and the hero in the archetypal story essentially goes out and confronts chaos, and that's the indeterminate world. That's the world, the confusing, uncertain world, full of unexpected occurrences, dangerous, threatening, and also promising. The hero is the person who voluntarily confronts that and makes sense out of it and establishes habitable territory, let's say, a safe domain, a safe and productive domain. And in that pursuit, especially if it's done voluntarily, it's possible to find deep meaning. And that meaning is an expression of the instinct that guides us out into the unknown so that we can, conquer it, let's say, and prevail. And you might say, well, where did these stories come from? And I would say the answer to that is that because human beings are self-conscious, and that's something that really distinguishes us quite substantively from other animals, we've been watching ourselves behave for a very long time and trying to understand what it is that we're doing, both when we're successful and when we're unsuccessful. We've created stories, extracted stories or derived stories over thousands or tens of thousands of years that describe both the fundamental pattern of success and the fundamental pattern of failure. And those stories are encoded in great stories, in myths, essentially. And that the mythological landscape is the landscape of human experience. It's not the objective world. And the landscape of human experience and the objective world aren't the same thing. There's no pain. Pain is not an objective thing. It's part of the subjective world of human experience, but it requires an orientation that also starts with the assumption that meaning is primary rather than matter.
So this is where phenomenology comes in, right?
Right.
That's what phenomenology is, the study of what matters.
Yes, exactly. And
so this is why and then it goes back to why these meta-narratives, these archetypes exist. They instruct us on how to do just that, right? How to face chaos, how to face tragedy, because they provide examples. They set the pattern.
Yeah, they set the pattern. Yeah, and the issue is, how do you manifest the pattern in your own life? That's the crucial issue, is how do you realize the archetype in your own life? And the archetype, for example, the hero archetype is, you could say what it is it's that which you find admirable. That which you find spontaneously admirable is the pathway to the archetype. And you see, so people might tell stories about interesting and admirable people. And the reason they tell them is because they admire those people. And when they talk about them, other people listen. And so then you could imagine, well, if you distilled what people find most interesting and admirable about others, what you would end up at the end of the process of distillation would be something like an archetypal story. It would be something like the story of Buddha, or it would be something like the story of Christ. And life is a serious business, in my estimation. So you have to be serious about how you think and what you think and how you act. There's just no way around it.
Right. Because if you ignore it, what you're going to get are ideologies, and that's just going to destroy you.
Yeah, well, or nihilism.
Or nihilism, right.
And, as soon as the problem with nihilism is, well, if everything's cakes and roses, well, maybe you can tolerate it, but it's not going to see you through your father's descent into Alzheimer's disease. I can tell you that. You have to be metaphysically situated, because life is a tragedy. And there's elements of malevolence to it as well, which is also something that's well worth pointing out.
Let's go, please. Come on.
There has to be another way, and there is. The other way is to identify with the mythological hero, to take up arms against the adversary who wishes that everything would merely cease, and perhaps in the most horrible way possible, to struggle against the tyranny of the state, to put protective walls up against the catastrophe of the natural world, and to walk the proper line between chaos and order.
And that's where studying those myths can come in handy, because they set the pattern for you. That's the world they lay out. And everyone knows it. We know it because we go watch stories, we watch movies, we read novels, we play video games. They all have the same underlying phenomenological world at their heart. Yeah, and the other one,
front the dragon, get the gold and the girl.